Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to a video called Web Exclusive How a German Home Maximizes Energy Efficiency. Ask This Old House. This is from a channel called This Old House, so check it out. I do not know how they do this, but I know that German people tend to be quite practical and quite efficient. So I have no doubt that they're doing this in the appropriate manner. So let's check it out and comment, like, and subscribe.
All right, Kevin, so this is a typical German house. It's about 1,800 square feet. You know, U.S. is going to be about 25 to 2,700 average.
Okay.
You can feel the scale being a little bit smaller, but it's got everything you need.
Almost a third smaller.
Kitchen's right here.
Oh, wow. A small kitchen, right?
It's very compact.
Sort of an apartment kitchen almost.
This has got everything you need, a nice compact space. Here in the living room, you can see how a typical German house is heated. There's a boiler somewhere in the building that heats water, and then the water is delivered to either radiators like this or radiant floor heating.
Right, so different looking radiators than we're used to seeing.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, these radiators come in every size and shape. And
Yeah, I'm used to like a radiator being like very small, not necessarily like this huge thing.
water is really the ultimate transfer medium. If we heat water, we can now move it anywhere we want through the building. We can zone like crazy, and it's very comfortable delivering heat to a building.
So on a lot of projects that we work on, we do use radiators, but in general, the United States, don't we typically use forced hot air to heat the homes?
Right. I think that's a question of where we are. Germany is at a latitude which is north of almost anywhere in the United States, a little below Alaska, but in general, where it's a northern climate. So it's principally heating.
Right.
United States, we have a lot of places that need cooling predominantly, and so that drives the decision to use ducted systems for air conditioning. Once you have ducts for air conditioning, you can do heating as well, and it sort of becomes more convenient.
Got it.
Yeah, do they use the same sort of pipes? I would assume, right? It's not really a problem if it gets like too hot or too cold, depending on like when of the season. I wouldn't know, but apparently it's fine.
Numbers are really dramatic. 99% of the houses in Germany use radiators. 93% of the houses in the United States use forced hot air ducted systems.
Oh my God.
Huge difference.
It's crazy. So that's how they heat the building, but also you got to think about trying to keep the heat that you make inside the building. This is a typical German house, but there's glass. Now, glass is usually a huge liability. Look at the difference here.
A huge liability because this is a great place to lose the heat through
That's
glass.
right. So feel this. This thing,
Oh,
it's heavy. It's
I didn't really know that. I would assume it gets, I don't know, it gets hotter, I think, when you have like, when there's windows, right?
triple pane glass, triple.
Not like windows, but with glass, I think it just maintains heat a little bit better. But maybe it's because I'm thinking, yeah, but during the summer, you feel like you're like boiling. But yeah, during the winter, I guess it's the opposite. And it just makes the warm escape, basically.
Okay, and it closes tight as anything.
Yep, and very smooth operation right here.
And if that's not enough, you can close that, and you can also do this. Now, these are roll shades. Now, roll shades can drop down, so now once they close, they can provide an air gap like a storm window in the winter.
So at night these would come down and keep the heat in the house?
Absolutely.
Ooh.
Now, you also can use them for solar gain in the summer, so that it'll knock down the solar gain that comes in.
So when I see these back in the U.S., I typically think of them as storm shutters, but here it's about energy efficiency?
Right, it's energy efficiency, but it's also a cultural difference. People like to close these at night to sort of keep their place private.
Okay.
And look at this, Kevin. Here's the
Great
cross section
idea.
of the outside of the house. You've got concrete block right here that's insulated, and then outboard of that, you've got an additional 5 inches of insulation.
That's wrapped all the way around the house?
That's right. They want to keep the heat inside the building that they paid for. So in a German house, it's really about the size of
But that's the thing. You have to really maintain the heat because the winters are no joke.
the building. It's about how you deliver heat to the building. It's keeping the heat that you've paid for inside the building. And finally, it's about its efficiency and maintaining that high efficiency over time. If I do a system in the United States, it can go in perfectly efficient, but if it's not maintained, it can drop off over time.
So if I don't change my filters, if I don't clean the furnace or the boiler, that efficiency goes down year after year.
Right. Well, German
Correct.
government does not want that to happen. So what they do is they send an inspector to every single house in every single town once a year.
Really?
And that inspector is the chimney sweep.
And so what is he doing? Is he literally cleaning the chimneys?
He does an efficiency test and an emissions test. If it's not up to a certain standard, it gets turned off. It has to be repaired or replaced immediately. And look at the neighbor's house right here. You can see there's a ladder built right in to allow that chimney sweep to go up to the roof to check it and make sure everything's okay.
So built into the roof because they know he's coming every year?
Every single year. Now, the other thing that's different
That's
in Germany
awesome,
is a
actually.
thing called the Energy Pass. It's really a report card on every single building in the country, a history of how much energy is used by that building. Now, you might not think it's important, but it will come into play if you ever sell the building or if you're trying to rent an apartment. It would index what you'd pay for rent or what you might get for the building when you sell it.
So the value of my house can be determined in part by how efficient it is.
That's right. And what it does, it really invites.
I mean, that sounds great, although it sounds scary. I think when you start to think about it, it's, I don't know, did I'm losing my chance of, like, I don't know, asking more money for my house?
People to invest in their building to make it more energy efficient.
That's
So
what
it
they
is
do
really a
probably.
cultural thing.
It's a mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because, yeah, I think, you know, I'm making fun of it, but that's literally probably why they do it, because they know that if you're on top of things, then you're maybe if you want to sell it in the future, you'll have more opportunities to sell it for a better price if you actually invest in how efficient your house is. Because I think a lot of these things are probably just, you might think, oh, they're optional, like I just want to opt out of this. And yeah, of course, no one's forcing you to do this, but yeah, I get like they're kind of a little bit like, well, it's an incentive. It's not necessarily they're forcing you, but it's an incentive for you to, again, you want this to happen. But I was thinking like how efficient everything is. I think that Germans and sort of practicality and efficiency, they go like hand in hand. I think that obviously I'm not saying like, oh, the US, they have like, yeah, no, they don't have great, you know, I get like, I'm talking about the engineers and everyone that is involved in like, in all these process of, because I get, it's gotta be engineers, right? I'm starting to think, well, which one, like who's actually making this? Like who come up with the ideas for, again, like the energy, like the four, then like circulation system, the all this system, the radiator system. I would assume it's engineers. Again, probably I'm wrong. There's gotta be more people that actually work on this, like I don't know, the city planners, architects, whoever it is. But yeah, I'm not saying that all those people that are the American version of the engineers or the architects are bad or not efficient. But I think that I just, like he said, it's about mentality. And I think it's just a little bit more practical. I think in the US, I think people tend to value more, I'm talking about both about the owners and, yeah, let's say owners, not specifically renters, but the owners, because, if you're looking to buy a house or to build a house, to build an apartment, even just people, the big developers, I think they're just looking for other things. And because they're looking for other things, because they have a different mentality than in Germany and that in Europe, things end up sort of looking a little bit different, because I believe that, again, all the engineers and all the architects and everyone that works in said building, if it's not really the mentality and you're not really giving them what they're looking for, you're going to be out of a job and out of work. So you have to give people what they want. And in order to give people what they want, again, it's their mentality that you have to follow. So I can understand why in things are so different in Germany, just because their mentality is different, and their mentality is more about practicality and sort of being efficient. I think overcomes so many other things that I think in the US people just do not tend to do that. Again, general rule, not specifically like, oh, not everyone, but it's just, I think, again, the mentality thing is just a little bit different. I think obviously the needs as well of each house, each house is each apartment, each building is going to be different, because like he said, something very interesting is because I know that maps, obviously I know where Germany is on a map, and I know obviously where the US is, but I think like when you're looking at a map, because of the scale, sometimes, and I mean all the time, I think it's just hard to compare how, between countries and stuff. Because the map it's made for you to kind of to get a grasp of the geography of the place, and this is located here in this area and it's bordering like this in this country. But I know that in reality, to the actual scale and the actual scale in which everything is, I think it can be a little confusing, can be a little shocking just to see in the size of the actual countries, because again, everything's sort of up to scale, so it makes it easier for you to understand. But at the same time, when it comes to things like this, everything's in Germany, everything's up north compared to the US. It's sort of, oh, wait, what? I haven't actually realized. I have to like trace a line, in a map and see what he means. But of course, like he's saying it because he knows. But again, I hadn't actually thought of this, and it's true. Of course, if you're up north, I think you have more. Obviously, your needs are going to be different from someone that's below, this near, no, they're not, no, they're not, they're not super north, they're not super northern, they're a little bit more to the south. Again, not like in the equator, but still, you're a little bit more south, so obviously your climate's going to be different. And because the US also, and I know that Germany is huge as well, but because Germany, I think it's more of, I think the weather, it just tends to be a little bit more, I don't know, similar, like, I know obviously they have seasons and all of that, but I think just there's not that much of a big change, I think, between the north, the south, the east, and the west, in the sense that in the US, you definitely do have that. I think it's because, again, Germany is huge, but the US also is huge. It's just, again, because of how they're located, I think Germany is more uniform in that sense. Of course, I know there are cities in which, it gets colder, it gets snowier during the summer months, it gets warmer. Yes, I understand all of that, because again, all countries obviously they have different weathers, they have different cities. But I think in the US it's quite extreme. So because again, you're also, I think, even in the same city, like it can be really, really hot during the summer months, but it can be really, really cold during the winters as well. And I think they were looking for a way to, because again, you just can't like, oh, I'm switching my house around once winter comes. No, you can't really do that. So I guess they had to find a little bit of a balance between, what works for our constructions and what works for our type of weather, which of course is really important. It's probably the most important thing when you're thinking about building, doing a building. That's what you're probably thinking. Oh, how much insulation do you need and all of that. And of course, speaking about insulation, something very, very different, I think, from the US is like, in this case, again, not a huge builder. I am not really that familiar with a lot of these terms and how a house is actually built. And I know that there's a lot of techniques, and there's just a lot of ways you can build a house. But generally in the US, and that's a really big difference, it's more like they use, I think it's just a lot of wood and less sort of concrete, less cement, more sort of drywall. And the insulation, I just think it looks a little bit different. They just have different types. It's like a foam or something. I don't know if it's a foam, actually. I'm gonna call it a foam. I have no idea what material it is, something specific to insulation. But I know that probably in Germany they also use something similar. I don't know if it's exactly the same thing, but you can see in the actual building when he was showing the walls, you can look at the difference. I think in the US, the houses are just not typically built like this. You have, like he said, there's like a 2-inch sort of insulation, and here you have like the bricks, and then you have more insulation. It's just a little bit different. And of course, everything's very compacted, as in it's both things. It's really, really, again, you have like really thick walls, again, to maintain and trap the heat, which in the US, you don't really get that. Everything's a little bit thinner. Again, exceptions, of course. But usually everything's a little bit thinner, and the walls they're not going to be that wide. They, again, do not use cement. The builders, they do not really use that much cement or concrete. It's cement and concrete the same thing? Who knows? But I don't think they're using like that much in a lot of the houses in the US. And of course, the size, something really, really as well. And I will point that out in the mentality thing. It's just like the mentality is really different. I think in Germany, as in much places, I would assume basically all of Europe, everything has to be small, because they have a limited amount of space. It's not as if, go to town, build a 5-story house because you can. No, everything's small. Everything's smaller in Europe, just because, and I get the reasons everything was built 1,000 years ago, and still, again, the space is very limited, or, the houses are just really old, the spaces are really old. So I think it's more about actual practicality, like how much space could you need. In the US, because there's like long stretches, I think, of just like land, of unoccupied space, people go to town with it, and they go, yeah, sure, like make a huge house. And in the US, people like their houses to be like really big. You like your living room to be big and the entrance to be huge. It's just like you want space to roam. All the houses just tend to be huge, I think, compared to the ones in Europe, which are like matchbox. They're like super tiny. So again, compared to the US, I'm not saying they're tiny, super tiny. I guess obviously it all depends on how it's distributed and what you're used to, whatever. But again, it's a mentality thing. In the US, you just want everything to be big, and you want all the big houses. And it's not really a concern of, and how exactly are we heating this during the winter? People do not care. It's like, I don't know, just like use a radiator. We have like the heated floors. There's gonna be like, who cares? In Germany, because they're more practical, they're like, no, we can't build this huge house because it's gonna be like, how are we gonna do it during the winter? Because again, it's not efficient. And then long term, they're probably going to charge me more. And my house, I'm not gonna be able to like, sell my house for more because the maintenance, the energy efficient guy from the government, from the town is gonna come and be like, hey, no, you are using too much energy, you're using too much heat. Which again, probably in the US, that would be like, I don't know, you're limiting my rights to build, my house as big as I want to. If I want an 8-story house, I'm within my rights to do so. And yes, of course you can, but I think try doing that, I think in the US, and I would imagine like it wouldn't go along very well because again, people would think like freedom, it's within my rights. It's in the Constitution. And in Germany, I think people tend to be just more pragmatic in that sense. And they don't really care about like owning a huge house. It's like, I don't care. It's going to be a small house, compact house, but it's going to keep me warm during the winter and it's going to make me spend less energy basically, which again, it's really what they need. But that's it for today and I'll see you soon. Bye.